Hey everybody! Today I am just a few miles north of Charlotte in the areas of Huntersville and Davidson, North Carolina, and I'm really excited to be here and show you how many cool spots up here there are that represent the life and legacy of another really important person who signed the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence, named John Davidson. John Davidson was born in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania on December 15, 1735. His parents, Robert and Isabella, were immigrants from Scotland who came to America around the year 1729. Robert died in 1750 when John was around 15 years old, and Isabella moved to Rowan, North Carolina with John and his sister Mary. Isabella hired a tutor for the children named Henry Hendry, whom she later married. John and his sister Mary received exceptional educational advantages from their stepfather, but John chose the trade of blacksmithing for a livelihood. There is a land grant dated April 17, 1759 for land on Cottle Creek in Anson County, North Carolina to John Davidson, who was listed as a blacksmith. He moved to the Hopewell Church section of Mecklenburg County in 1760. The following year, on June 2, 1761, he married Violet Wilson, the daughter of a wealthy English Catawba River plantation owner named Samuel Wilson. The newlyweds began their life together in a 2-room log cabin on a plot of farmland given to them by Violet's father. The cabin, which they called Rural Retreat, eventually had 8 rooms before it was lost in a fire in 1898. The log cabin had stood in use for over 120 years. John and Violet had 10 children who survived together. In addition to blacksmithing and farming his land, John also sold grain and livestock. During the colonial period, he became an active participant in civic affairs and, along with Colonel Thomas Polk, worked to establish Charlotte as the seat of Mecklenburg County. He also served as Justice of the Peace and as a member of the House of Commons for Mecklenburg County. He was one of Mecklenburg's 2 delegates sent to the colonial North Carolina Assembly at New Bern in 1773. As a member of the Mecklenburg Committee of Safety, he was present the night in May 1775 when the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence was drafted, and he was one of the 27 men who signed it. At the outbreak of hostilities between the colonies and Great Britain, the North Carolina Provincial Congress convened in September of 1775 and appointed Thomas Polk as colonel for the Mecklenburg troops, with John Davidson appointed as second major. They participated together in the Snow Campaign against the South Carolina Tories in 1775 and in General Griffith Rutherford's expedition against the Cherokees in 1776. John Davidson likely participated in both campaigns. He then transferred from field service to the position of brigade major for the Salisbury militia, commanded first by Rutherford until his capture at Camden, after which the brigade was taken over by General William Lee Davidson. Davidson rendered service to the militia and Continental troops alike. General William Lee Davidson stayed at the home of Major John Davidson while organizing his army of volunteers to delay Cornwallis's crossing of the Catawba, and General William Lee Davidson was fatally shot while riding a horse from John Davidson's stables on the banks of the river at the Battle of Cowan's Ford on February 1, 1781. John Davidson really prospered after the war. By the late 1780s, he owned nearly 5,000 acres of land and had become one of several investors in a highly lucrative iron mine. He began construction on a fine 2-story plantation mansion on his rural retreat in 1788. The house was in the popular Georgian style, constructed of bricks made nearby. John and Violet named their new home Rural Hill in honor of the cabin known as Rural Retreat, and it was immediately the grandest of all the Catawba River plantation homes and became the center of the Davidson and extended families for many years. Surrounding the homes were numerous outbuildings, including a well house, an ash house that was used to make lye for soap, a summer kitchen, a carriage house, a smokehouse, barns, stables, and pens. John owned many enslaved persons, making him one of the county's largest slave owners. When the 1793 invention of the cotton gin made cotton cultivation more profitable, John substantially increased his use of enslaved labor. John Davidson's most important contribution to the economic development of North Carolina was developing the iron industry. In 1789, the Big Ore Bank had been granted to General Peter Forney, who sold interests to Davidson and his sons-in-law, Captain Alexander Brevard and Major Joseph Graham. I talked about this a lot more in a video I did on Joseph Graham last fall if you'd like to watch that video. By 1795, the three men had bought out Forney and were conducting a flourishing iron business. John Davidson furnished the majority of the capital and the practical experience working with iron, and Joseph Graham operated Vesuvius Furnace and Brevard Mount Tirzah forges. Iron became practically a medium of exchange in a region where money was scarce, and munitions were manufactured for the government in their foundry for the War of 1812. In 1823, at the age of 88 and 5 years after the death of his wife Violet, John Davidson decided to retire. He appointed his son-in-law, William Lee Davidson, who was the son of the famous Revolutionary War general, as his trustee to dispose of all of his personal and real estate properties. John spent the remainder of his days living with William Lee and his daughter Betsy at their nearby plantation home known as Beaver Dam, which is still standing to this day. However, John continued working until he was 90 years old and lived on to the age of 97, which was an extremely long life in those days. He passed away at Beaver Dam on January 10th of 1832 and was taken back to Rural Hill to be buried in the family plot beside his wife. Unfortunately, very few of John's personal belongings survive to this day because the mansion home at Rural Hill was destroyed in a fire in 1886 while owned by John's grandson, Adam Brevard Davidson, when the family was away. Only a few columns remain of the once amazing grand house. Ironically, John Davidson's original log cabin, known as Rural Retreat, was still standing at this time and survived for another 12 years before it too went up in flames. John's advanced age is of special significance, as he was the final surviving member of the Mecklenburg Convention who signed the Declaration of Independence. He gave a testimony when he was 95 years old and living at Beaver Dam with his daughter and son-in-law. According to the family, John's mind was still clear at that time, and he testified as follows. There were 2 men chosen from each captain's company to meet in Charlotte to take the subject into consideration. John McNitt Alexander and myself were chosen from one company. When the members met, they were perfectly organized for business. A motion was made to declare ourselves independent of the Crown of Great Britain, which was carried by a large majority. Then Dr. Ephraim Brevard was appointed to give us a sketch of the Declaration of Independence, which he did. Then Captain James Jack was appointed to take it on to the American Congress, then sitting in Philadelphia. When Jack returned, he stated that the declaration was presented to Congress, and the reply was that they highly esteemed the patriotism of the citizens of Mecklenburg, but they thought the measure to be premature. I am confident that the Declaration of Independence by the people of Mecklenburg was made public at least 12 months before that of the Congress of the United States. In 1923, a man named Edward Lee Baxter Davidson undertook the project of building a memorial wall around the cemetery plot and restoring and landscaping the cemetery. Construction of this wall took him 2 months. He used rocks that were taken from the foundation of the Rural Hill plantation home that burned down in 1886 and also from the Catawba River. The wall was constructed in layers of different colored stones. 2 stone pillars with an iron gate form the entrance. Each pillar is topped with a large white rock. A large pillar, also topped with a white rock, forms each corner, and the wall rises as it nears the outside corners. Outside of the wall, at its right corner when facing the entrance, stands 2 boulders, one is stacked on the other, to which a bronze plaque is attached. In relief, at the top of the plaque is a yew tree holding a hornet's nest with hornets buzzing. Below is the inscription, along with the insignia of the Sons of the American Revolution. At the bottom is a larger hornet's nest attached to a tree branch with hornets in flight. Today, Rural Hill serves as a nonprofit historic site, nature preserve, living farm, and as a location for cultural events. It remained in the Davidson family and their descendants until 1992, when the last survivors sold it to Mecklenburg County. When I showed up to film for this video, I was super bummed to realize that they had just hosted the annual Scottish Highland Games a few weekends prior. I've never attended the Highland Games, but that sounds like so much fun, and I'd really love to go watch sometime, especially knowing the history of the Davidson family who immigrated here from Scotland and how this land has been in such an important family for so many generations. In doing this research for the video, I expected to learn a lot about John Davidson, but I did not expect to be so fascinated with the history of Rural Hill after John's death in 1832. The Rural Hill website has a lot of interesting information which I'd like to share here. I'm going to put the links down below in the description box, but I'm really considering coming back someday to do the hike. It's a little over 2 miles that completely encircles the property here and maybe share the history with you directly from their website.